Good evening, everyone, or perhaps I should say good afternoon for some of you. Thank you for joining us for the State of CPJ. Whether you're a longtime partner with the Center for Public Justice or you're joining us for the first time, we're grateful you're here. My name is Mariah Humphreys, and my face may be new to some of you. I joined CPJ last November, and I serve as Director of Communications. And today we're excited to share an update about the work that you make possible, where we believe God is calling us in the years ahead. At CPJ, we exist to equip citizens. We develop leaders. We shape public policy so that government and civil society flourish together for the common good. And in a moment when questions of law, human dignity, civic responsibility are on many of our minds, we're happy that you joined us today to learn how CPJ thinks about the intersections of faith and public life, and to hear how Christians are using this framework to serve their communities. So today we are going to give you an update on the impact of CPJ's work. We're going to hear about forward-looking vision from our CEO, Stephanie Summers. We're going to hear about stories of how CPJ is forming leaders and strengthening institutions. And then we're going to have a time for your questions at the end. But before we begin, of course, we always have a few housekeeping notes. So if you haven't already, feel free to introduce yourself. And there is a poll that will be popping up. Feel free to answer that at any point. We wanted to start off with our CEO, Stephanie Summers, who will be coming on here shortly, and give her a good welcome. Stephanie.
Thank you, Mariah. Welcome to everyone who's here. It's really a gift to be gathered with you here this evening, this afternoon. There's certain moments in public life when you can feel people are searching. They're searching for language, they're searching for guidance, they're searching for a steadier way to live out their faith in a complicated world. And I believe we're living in one of those moments right now. Across churches, universities, government offices, faith-based nonprofits, and families, we meet Christians who care deeply about their neighbors and the common good, but who often feel they don't fully belong within the political categories that are available to them. Many people feel pulled towards extremes that do not reflect the fullness of their faith. And at the Center for Public Justice, we believe that this moment is not simply a challenge, it is an invitation. At the Center for Public Justice, we understand government to be one of God's good gifts in the world, a structure that's intended to help communities flourish, to protect the vulnerable, and to uphold justice. Yet, like every institution, it must continually be guided, reformed, and strengthened through faithful engagement. What encourages us is that research shows that there are actually millions of Christians quietly searching for exactly this kind of thoughtful, faithful public engagement. People who are eager for formation rather than slogans, for wisdom rather than outrage, and for community rather than isolation. Our calling at CPJ is to help provide that community where Christians can think deeply, act responsibly, and serve faithfully in public life. So tonight, we want to show you some of what that looks like in practice.
Thank you, Stephanie. We appreciate you. We appreciate your leadership. And we're going to see your face again in just a minute. So we're going to get used to you tonight. One way to understand CPJ and the work that we do is to see how it takes shape in the lives and leadership of people across our communities. And as many of you know, we have the privilege to connect with faith leaders all over the country. And Chris Chen is one of those leaders. And Chris is the assistant pastor of the Great Commission Community Church in Northern Virginia. And he's joining us today to share how he became involved with CPJ and how this work has impacted him and his ministry. Chris, it is great to have you on here. We are glad you've joined us today. Welcome.
Hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I was actually first introduced to CPJ because they had invited someone else to a leaders gathering. He couldn't go, and so he asked my friend, who also couldn't go, and so he asked me to come. And I wish those two could have been there, but I'm thankful that this is how I got to know the CPJ. And I went because it was a gathering to discuss what we could do about the family separations happening from the administration's immigration policy. I went because I had a general theological understanding that the gospel impacts all areas of life, and that as Christians, we are to seek the flourishing of all people. But I didn't know what that looked like, what that practically looked like. And honestly, I didn't know if it was even possible. But that gathering was deeply impactful to me. I saw how Christians can and should be calling our government to account, and how we can and should advocate for policies that are just, merciful, and compassionate. And since that gathering and getting to know the CPJ more, there are two ways I've changed. I've seen myself change. One, I can honestly say that my own discipleship has matured. I believe and can see how new life extends past like our personal lives, but to governments, to policies and communities. And two, I can say that my faith has increased. Stephanie challenged us at that gathering about immigration not to think about what is politically feasible, but what is right. And I was reminded that Christians are called to a life of obedience and faith, and that I can trust Him with His work of renewal. And I can see these reflected in my sermons, in how I craft small group curriculums, and how I'm discipling others. And so, thank you, CPJ. Thank you for being a faithful witness, for your prophetic voice in our time, and for calling and equipping the church to reflect our God.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing how your connection with CPJ shaped your work and your commitment to strengthening families and communities. I think testimonies like yours help us see how CPJ's ideas move from conversation into real institutional impact. So we appreciate you. Thank you for joining us tonight. I think one way to gain a larger view of how stories like Chris's connect our broader mission and priorities, Stephanie's going to walk us through three key outcomes from our strategic plan.
Yeah, thank you. And Chris, thank you for sharing your story with us. I want to share with everyone tonight three areas from our strategic plan that have shaped some of our work this year. So, a webinar, we'd be here all night if we talked about everything. So, I'm just going to share three. The first area is related to CPJ's mission priority of equipping citizens. So, over the past year, CPJ has equipped citizens like Chris to understand a core conviction of CPJ that God created institutions to contribute to the flourishing of societies. Institutions like the family, religious communities, schools, nonprofits, and government. We believe that societies flourish when each of these institutions is able to fulfill their God-given role. Chris spoke to one specific example where CPJ's framework has been applied, and I'd like to speak to it a little further. This is to the current immigration enforcement effort. As an example of our framework in practice, rightly ordered, government is the institution that bears the responsibility to secure borders and regulate immigration. And government must also uphold the integrity of families and the freedom of faith-based organizations to live out their convictions and how they serve. So over the past year, one way we have worked to equip citizens is through our educational efforts on how these responsibilities should work together. Our goal here is twofold. First, immigration enforcement that prioritizes the integrity of the institution of the family. God designed families for the care and nurture of their members. This means that government must actually make efforts to keep families together as much as possible so they can fulfill this responsibility, rather than breaking families apart as the functional impact of government policy to secure borders and regulate immigration. Our second goal is that government works to protect the religious freedom of faith-based organizations who serve their communities as commanded by their faith. This would mean that while government is enforcing immigration, it is not to enact policies criminalizing the faith-motivated activities of faith-based organizations as they offer care for widows, orphans, and sojourners. This is just one example, but it's an important one, of how CPJ equips citizens to understand the important role that government holds and its responsibility, both to uphold the responsibilities it's been given, but uphold the responsibilities God's given to other institutions like the family and faith-based organizations as well. The second area I'd like to talk about from our strategic plan that shaped our work this year is related to CPJ's mission priority of developing leaders, in this case, Christian public servants. CPJ hosts our bipartisan Civitas Fellowship for early career congressional staff on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., to develop the leadership of these congressional staff in their first 5 years of service. These young adults are on a leadership trajectory where many get promoted every 90 days. They often end up in policy leadership roles within a congressional office within their first 5 years. In a demanding and often dehumanizing political environment where there are no rewards for talking to the other side, the leadership development of the young men and women who join the Civitas Fellowship is an imperative. The Civitas Fellows receive guidance that helps them understand public service as Christian vocation. They wrestle with what it means to pursue public justice and to honor the diverse responsibilities of institutions. They learn how to uphold human dignity while navigating policy complexity and help each other deepen their faith, even amidst an environment of intense professional pressure. The Civitas Fellows live their calling with integrity, steadiness, and a deep sense of vocation, learning how to understand and find the best part of the arguments of the other party and to work together both during and after their fellowship with us ends, bringing CPJ's framework into considering legislative proposals, how their offices serve constituents, and how relationships are built across differences. We don't shy away from discussing hard and often polarizing topics in the context of the Civitas Fellowship, and we ask the Civitas Fellows to journal for us during their fellowship about what they're learning and how God is changing them. One recent participant shared that she had grown in her compassion, understanding for the first time the complexity of why women choose abortion for economic reasons. She relayed that for the first time, she realized that policies designed to help women on the economic margins, like paid family leave or a childcare subsidy, were actually pro-life policies and could lead to fewer women choosing abortion, and that she was glad to have been able to have the opportunity to think more deeply than she previously had about these policies in the context of the Civitas Fellowship. Equipping leaders like the Civitas Fellows is slow. It's relational work, but our hope is that it is also one of the most enduring ways that public life is being strengthened. A third area from our strategic plan that shaped our work this year that I'd like to highlight is related to CPJ's mission priority of shaping policy. CPJ works across a deeply polarized political landscape. We have deepened our efforts to engage policymakers across the political spectrum while maintaining independence and refusing the false choice between withdrawal and uncritical alignment. Over the last year, we have been committed to faithful presence rather than political posturing. We have been able to engage, we have been able to dissent, and we have never confused proximity to power with faithfulness. Alongside all of this, CPJ is also quietly growing. We have more partners, more programs, more people who are looking to us for guidance in a confusing season. We receive that growth not as validation, but as responsibility.
Thank you again, Stephanie. CPJ's impact doesn't usually show up as a single headline. I think more often it shows up when leaders begin thinking differently about their responsibilities, and that shift in perspective shapes how they serve their communities. I'd love for you to hear about a few moments where that's happened this past year. Some of CPJ's team is going to join online here, and we're going to quickly, and the keyword there is quickly, give some 2025 highlights. So I'm honored to share the screen with these amazing humans. We're going to have Charlie Mayo, who is CPJ's Director of Faith-Based Leaders Alliance, Don Brotherton, who is Director of Development, and then Gideon Salazar, who is Director of Faith-Based Policy and Research. So we're going to start off with Charlie. And just FYI, Charlie's on dual duty today. So if you see a little human or two come across the screen, just know that their Bluey episode probably has ended, or maybe they need a snack. So just, technology and children, all the fun things today. Charlie, thank you for being with us today. I have a question for you, and that is, what's one moment when CPJ's distinctive approach really landed with somebody, or I guess with an institution, and what happened as a result?
Thanks, Mariah. It's so great to be with everyone tonight or this afternoon. One story came to mind for me. So, I was having lunch with a public servant just down the street from CPJ's office. We were discussing CPJ's distinctive vision of public justice and how it often involves faith-based organizations in government working together to meet the needs of their community. But as we continued to dialogue, he shared with me the real challenges in making these kinds of partnerships work and flourish. He shared how faith-based organizations have to learn the language of government to equally compete and win grant opportunities. And truly, many just don't even have a basic vocabulary of how government speaks. So he literally asked out loud, what if there was a resource, a tool that could help faith-based organizations learn the ABCs of government partnerships? It's from this conversation that led to an entire creation of a storytelling series this fall launched by CPJ called Better Together. In this series, we created a specific tool called the ABCs of Government Partnerships, introducing faith-based organizations to some of the most fundamental terms they will discover in a grant writing process. And then months later, after this conversation, a different CPJ staff member was on a call with national and state faith center directors, and they began to discuss their desire to see faith-based organizations partner with government. But again, often how many of these organizations are not equipped to do this. In this moment, my colleague had a chance to tell this group of public servants about our series, Better Together, and the particular tool, the ABCs of government partnerships. And in light of this connection, many public servants were excited and thankful to use this CPJ resource and further embody CPJ's distinctive vision of public justice.
Thanks, Charlie, for joining us. We appreciate your dedication to our faith-based leaders. I think that we can agree probably that that kind of impact matters. It doesn't only happen consistently, or I guess it only happens consistently if the organization itself has strong support. And support can come in many different ways. But I think where our development team takes on the important work is another really big part of supporting CPJ. So Don Brotherton's going to join us. And Don, here's my question for you. What is one internal change that we made in 2025 that you think strengthened CPJ's ability to do this work in 2026?
Hi, Mariah. That's a great question. Yeah, this year we've made some great strides at CPJ to help people engage with our work more easily. We know that our ideas are valuable, but they can sometimes be hard for new audiences to grasp right away. That's something we hear a lot. And that's why we're focusing on improving our communication and sharing resources to welcome those curious about public justice. We want them to be on board with us and to be able to get involved. So we're excited to announce that we're expanding our communications capacity, thanks to the support from many of you. And we've partnered with experts who will help us connect our communications, development, and program strategies so that our ideas can reach a much wider audience. That's very exciting. We're looking forward to that happening in the near future. It's already begun. We've also dedicated time to strengthen our communications team, ensuring we have the right leadership and skills in place. Right. And we're taking a thoughtful approach to ensure our growth is helpful to our audience and sustainable. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So this year has been all about building the foundation we need. We're enhancing our storytelling, expanding digital learning opportunities, and creating easier ways for supporters to introduce CPJ to other people. So while these behind the scenes improvements may not always be visible to everyone, they do empower more leaders, churches, and communities to use our ideas in very practical ways. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to the coming years. So thank you, Don. I think what I get from both you and Charlie is these two things belong together. There's ideas that matter and they're life-changing, and then the institutional support that carries those ideas forward. So thank you so much for sharing with that. Gideon, your role is another layer of CPJ's focus, which is researching policy, engaging with policymakers and faith-based organizations, so we can shape what policy looks like. So policy language can sometimes feel abstract, but for faith-based organizations, it can become very personal very quickly. Can you share an example from this past year that shows what it looks like for CPJ to address these complex policy questions and advocate for public justice?
Let's see. Can you hear me? I'm having trouble turning on my video.
We can.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go. You can imagine me there on screen.
Yes, your
But
lovely face.
well, Mariah, most definitely, policy language coming out of DC can definitely look abstract on paper. But for faith-based organizations in Colorado and Texas and Michigan, it becomes very personal very quickly. Recently, a faith-based organization reached out to us after receiving a federal grant notice for a program that they participated in for years. And it contained new DHS cooperation requirements. You could say ICE cooperation requirements, restrictions related to serving immigrants unlawfully present in the U.S. For them, this wasn't just abstract, it wasn't theoretical. Their religious mission compels them to serve vulnerable people, period. But suddenly they're asking themselves, would we have to verify immigration status? Could DHS request our participation list? Are we being asked to change who we serve? And can we continue partnering with the federal government without compromising our faith commitments? Those are not small questions, but that's where CPJ stepped in. We analyzed the regulatory language alongside legal experts. We engaged policymakers directly to clarify what the requirements did and did not mean. And we wanted to ensure that this organization could continue serving faithfully without unnecessary fear or distancing themselves from federal partnerships. So this is happening repeatedly, whether it's confusion around the National Security Grant Program, proposed revisions to equal treatment regulations, or agency rulemaking that unintentionally burden or proactively empowers faith-based providers. CPJ is serving as the principal translator in the room, helping policymakers understand institutional religious freedom implications and helping faith-based organizations navigate federal policy with confidence. You know that through our coalition to preserve religious freedom, we're also convening leaders across faith traditions to advocate for policies that protect religious institutions at the same time without privileging them and advancing equal treatment and public justice in a pluralistic way. What makes CPJ distinctive is that we think about religious freedom, not just individually, but also institutionally. We care about whether churches, schools, adoption agencies, shelters, and workforce programs can serve the public with integrity. And so when they can, that makes our community stronger, that makes our nation stronger.
Thank you, Gideon. Your work is invaluable to CPJ, and I love always listening to what you're doing and how you're moving these things forward. And I think the stories that we've heard today show where CPJ has come from and what God has built through this community. So I think the next question is, where do we go from here? I think that's one of the natural steps that we take. And so that's where Stephanie's going to come back in and just kind of help us as we look ahead. So Stephanie, please come on and speak to us.
All right, happy to. Thanks, Maura. As we look ahead, we're asking kind of a simple but important question. What would it look like if far more Christians were formed to serve faithfully in public life? And we really believe that the next chapter of CPJ centers kind of on three movements to answer that question. First, on deepening formation. We know that the challenges that are facing public life are not solved by quick answers. They require leaders whose thinking has been shaped over time, leaders who understand public justice, institutional responsibility, and pluralism as how God ordered our common life, not just ideas. So CPJ will continue expanding leadership formation across government, civil society, and church communities in particular. Second, we want to increase accessibility. Don spoke to this a little bit, but for many years, CPJ's work has been deeply relational and often in person, and that's wonderful, and it remains essential. But we also recognize that there is an opportunity to extend formation to people who may never attend a conference or a fellowship in person. We are going to expand digital training, add accessible resources, and new learning platforms where we hope to meet citizens where they are and equip them for faithful public engagement within their own communities. And the last, third, is cultivating community. So, one of the most consistent things that we hear from supporters is how meaningful it is to discover they're not alone. CPJ is increasingly growing as a network of people who encourage one another, learn together, and carry these ideas into countless institutions and neighborhoods across the country. Growth matters to us, not as expansion for its own sake, but as stewardship. And we believe these ideas are needed by far more people than we currently reach, and we feel a responsibility to share the ideas faithfully and carefully. What gives me the most hope is not simply CPJ as an organization. It's actually the growing community of leaders, supporters, scholars, pastors, and public servants who are living out this vision in quiet and faithful ways every single day. And many of you in this webinar are part of that story. If CPJ has been particularly meaningful to you, one of the most powerful ways that you can help is actually by introducing others who are searching for this kind of formation.
Thanks again, Stephanie. I think what we've heard today reflects both the depth of CPJ's work and the growing community that makes it possible. So, on behalf of the staff here, I know that this work is hard, but it is also so rewarding, and we wouldn't want to be anywhere else pursuing public justice. So, you've heard a lot over the past few minutes, and you may have a question, you may have a reflection. We'd love to hear them. So, as you're thinking about those, feel free to send those to us through the Q&A option on your screen. And I'm going to give you some ways to stay connected because it would not be a webinar if we did not give you ways to stay connected and stay involved with CPJ. So if you're new, here's the simplest next step. You can sign up for our newsletters and keep informed on what we're doing. We send out regular information and communications, and that's the best way for you to keep up with what's going on. Share that information with people you think might be interested. We have several events from our programs over the next coming days and months, and these are easy ways to learn and get involved. And repost content. Some of you are social media people, some of you are not. It's okay. Either way, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and then we're also on LinkedIn. And so share our stories, share posts when they connect with you. And I think these are the small ways that expand the work of CPJ, and you are going to help us do this work. I think if you're a longtime supporter, first of all, thank you. We cannot do this work without you, quite literally. Your support of the Center for Public Justice makes our work possible, but your partnership goes beyond the financial generosity and faithful attendance. I think Don touched on that really well earlier. It's this growing community of people who live the mission in their daily lives. So together, we're cultivating faithful presence within communities, within our institutions. We're bearing witness to justice and responsibility and hope in public life. So introduce CPJ to your leaders, to your educators, to policymakers, pastors, organizations. We want those introductions. We want to be able to have these conversations beyond who's in this space today. And then pray for us, all of our public officials, to uphold justice for the good of everyone. Okay, so we knew you'd have some questions. We do have some of our team here to answer a few. And one of them, I'm going to go ahead and just start off and direct to Stephanie, because why not start off straight from the top and have her kick this off? Stephanie, there are many justice organizations out there doing amazing life-changing work. We know this. We partner with them. We're peers with them. We labor with them. For someone new to CPJ, whether they're justice curious or justice committed, what makes our approach to faith in public life distinctive?
Thanks, Mariah. I love the idea of justice curious. That makes me curious about the question.
Right.
So I would start by saying CPJ begins with the answer to a really deep question, right? What does public justice require for the flourishing of the entire political community? It's a unique question. I would say the other distinctives, right, are we really believe that government is a public legal institution that God calls to uphold justice for all, while also respecting the distinct responsibilities of other institutions in society, like families or religious communities or business, schools, etc. We really believe that justice requires equal public room for people of all faiths and people who would say they have no faith. So our work, in some ways is really institutionally focused. It's long term. We care about the integrity of public institutions and we care about people, not just ourselves. We're really distinctive in our pursuit of justice because we're Christian in conviction, we're pluralist in principle, and we're comprehensive in our scope.
Yeah, I ditto that. Great answer. Well done. I think the next one I will go to Don. Don, your role is important to CPJ. We know this, and you have a great view of how our community supports this work. What gives you the most hope when you think about the community forming around CPJ right now?
That's a very good question as well. You're full of great questions, Mariah.
I
Um,
try.
what gives me the most hope, I think, is the many ways, the variety of ways that people want to be part of our work. I mean, as the director of development, you might expect that my answer would naturally be about financial generosity. And of course, the faithfulness of our donors is something I never take for granted. We're very, very grateful for each person and the gifts that they give. But what I'm seeing more and more is that people come to CPJ and ask, what else can I do? How else can I be involved? Are there other things? And they're looking for that community that Stephanie was talking about. So they're sharing our content with a pastor friend or introducing us to a policy leader in their network, or simply forwarding a newsletter to someone they think is ready to hear CPJ's framework for public justice. So that kind of ownership, where supporters see themselves as ambassadors of CPJ's mission and not just funders of it, it's theirs too. That tells me that community is growing and it means something to them. People aren't just writing a check and moving on. They're bringing others into the story and want to share what they find valuable about this organization with other people, with people in their family or congregation or friend circle. So that matters because, as Stephanie said earlier, one of the most powerful things that you can do is introduce CPJ to someone who's searching for exactly this kind of thoughtful, faithful engagement. Financial partnership is one meaningful way to be involved, and we do need it and appreciate it. But so is your voice and your network and your willingness to say to someone, hey, I think you would fit at CPJ. You should learn about this. So all of that is very hopeful, and I'm very happy to be part of people's journey in that way.
Thank you, Don. Great answer. Gideon, this one's going to be for you. So, faith-based policy and research recently expanded, and you now have Shem Opalat on your team as Director of Global Health and Civic Engagement. Well done, by the way. We love Shem. He's amazing. So CPJ is known for domestic focus. So is global health a new area for CPJ? And what does Shem's new role with global health signal about CPJ's commitment to public justice?
We are definitely excited to have Shem on board with us. Great addition to the office, brings a wealth of knowledge, experience within global health. But global health is really a natural extension of CPJ's faith-based policy work. Much of CPJ's work has been to strengthen, to elevate the role of faith-based institutions in serving the public square. So schools, child welfare organizations, adoption agencies, workforce programs. And we know that faith-based organizations are some of the most trusted and effective providers of healthcare around the world. Consider how broad medical missions is and the work that they do in that. Domestic policy in the US affects their work globally. So we saw that early on with the current administration. And in many regions, like in sub-Saharan Africa, faith-based hospitals, clinics are not peripheral players. They are primary health infrastructure. They're there for the long haul. They deliver maternal care, disease treatment, and they provide long-term community health with relationship of trust and spiritual care. So faith-based policy in the US shapes whether these trusted institutions can operate freely, whether they can continue to partner with foreign governments and to deliver the care consistent with their convictions. So with our work in global health and civic engagement, CPJ is signaling that we are deepening our commitment to institutional religious freedom and to understanding how policy frameworks affect faith-based institutions on the ground, whether in Alexandria, Virginia, or in Uganda. So it's a natural extension of the faith-based policy work that we're currently doing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's going to be great to see what happens in the coming years through global health and CPJ, and so I'm excited to see what Shim does. So thank you for that. I think some other questions. Stephanie, if you can take this one on. CPJ works across many issue areas. How does CPJ decide where to focus its policy engagement?
I love this question. So we have a cross-functional team at CPJ that works on policy. So everyone who works on policy meets regularly to talk about what is happening in policy, and does that in relation to the variety of networks that each of us is involved in. And we also use that team and outside experts that we seek out for advice to give us feedback on a document that we created several years ago that is a guide to when CPJ works on a particular policy issue. So that gets workshopped by our team. It gets discussed within the context of our networks and gets a little bit of insight from other folks. We often are discerning how to make the best, wisest use of the resources that God's entrusted to us. And is there a place where we are able, I'm trying to think of things that are within the rubric without having it in front of me, right? Are there ways that CPJ's particular perspective or expertise is a missing piece in the larger policy conversation, where it would be a complement to things that are happening already? Is this a place where we would be able to bring in other partners who we know would share a similar view, where we wouldn't be the lone voice, but we would be able to work with strength in numbers? And we also, I think, soberly examine kind of the capacity to do really good work, but also the questions about, Chris alluded to this in his conversation earlier, right? How do we work towards what's right, not just what's politically feasible? Um, that's a long haul perspective, and it is one that we take pretty seriously. Um, there are plenty of things that people ask us to work on that are quite short term. They're just solving a quick problem. And typically those are things where we're not, trying to bring our distinctive perspective to something super fast.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't need this kind of structural change that is really CPJ's sweet spot. Great question. Thank you.
While I have you there,
Yeah.
stay there. Um, how does CPJ help churches think about public life? This is not something that churches have always thought about, and it is something that we're feeling more um, urgency with. So how do we help churches?
Yes. So I think there's three things I'd like to talk about briefly. One is just as an overarching thing within the context of all of our education. We try really hard to ensure that our perspective represents the church as an institution, not being a political actor, in the sense that we think it potentially compromises the witness of the gospel if the church is viewed as political. There are lots of ways I could unpack that would take a long time. But
Right.
if, people basically say about especially people who are not fluent with faith, look at the church and say that church is just an extension of fill in the blank political ideology. That's a problem for the witness of the gospel, and it's actually a problem for our work in a pluralistic society. So the kind of corollary with that is how do we then, as an organization that helps form people to think about themselves as members of churches, where the church has a
Mhm.
particular, form, shape, witness in the world of forming people to love God and serve neighbors. And they are also people who are members of that, but they're members of a political community that they share with their neighbors, their citizens, right? And the work that they need to do wearing, for lack of a better way to frame this, a citizen hat, that work is what we're trying to speak into, right? It helps navigate some of the complexity of, people feeling like I'm concerned that my pastor is going to tell me who to vote for, or those kinds of things, because it's
Right.
helping give people the ability to see themselves, simultaneously inhabiting more than one role. Um,
Mhm.
it also, the third thing would be our work that we have done very deliberately, that's over the last year, to help pastors themselves think about how they are talking about political issues from the context of their pulpits, and what kind of formation for Christian citizenship is happening within their congregations, and to work on that in community. We actually have a fellows program called Preaching Reformed specifically for that, where you have people from all over the country who are participants, trying to learn together how to sharpen their practice, and help keep that distinction, which actually allows more people to become more engaged as citizens, because it's not this kind of reticence that people have about, like, am I in a complicated space and I don't know how to navigate it.
So helpful, so needed. While we're kind of talking along the faith-based, Gideon, I think this might be a good question for you since you're named in it. But people want to know if there was any sort of outcome from the story that you told earlier. You shared an example. Is there any sort of update that you want to provide from that, or is that just a good example for us to think about?
Yeah, thank you. So not every story has an happy ending, and some stories are still yet to be unraveled. Um, there wasn't any clarity that we got directly from officials, but we got a lot of clarity from a lot of the legal experts there. We caution not to share too much information just because of that organization entrusted us with, with a lot of just with their trust. But I will say that our work is ongoing with contacting agency officials to get better clarity. The good thing is that we might not get to dictate what is talked about in conversations that we have, but we are grateful for the conversations that we do get to have. So not all, I would say, advocacy is direct. Sometimes right now we operate in a place of just building relationships and fostering trust. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have a period on the end of that story, but I will say this, that the organization that did contact us has been just grateful for the input that we have provided, for the briefs and the summaries that we've given them. It gives them some assurance and confidence in what their next steps are. But we're just glad to play that role of being able to just to translate as well what is happening in a particular regulatory landscape.
That's great. I appreciate that because I think it's a good reminder in this work that we don't always get to see the period at the end of that. It doesn't stop us from doing the work and we just keep moving forward. I think there's several mentions of, how we can be engaged, and I think we've kind of covered some of those. And I think one of the questions that I kind of want to end us on is this. As directors, there's a few directors on here. We meet with Stephanie on a regular basis. And the way she ends every director's meeting with each of us is, how can I pray for you? And I love that. And I wanted to mention that because that doesn't happen everywhere, even in a faith-based organization. And then we pray every week as a team. We gather and we pray for one another and we share about each other's lives. And I think that is so important in this work. And as we're sharing this time with our broader community, I wanted to kind of continue that practice of prayer, reminding ourselves why we do this work and for whom we do it. So I wanted to ask each one of you, what's an area in your program that our community can pray for us this year? Don, I'm going to have you go first, and then Gideon can follow. And then I'm going to step in and answer for Charlie because I asked him earlier, and then Stephanie can end our time. Don, what would you say?
Um, I would say I would like you to continue to pray for all of the people who support us. Um, my development team prays through all of our donors throughout the course of the year as individuals, and we continually thank God for the many people who give financially to keep CPJ strong. And our annual fund is very strong, so we're really thankful for that. So please pray for God's blessings on the people who support us, their families, their communities, the work that they're doing in their communities, and pray that they're encouraged in some way each day and find great joy in all the ways that they give to others.
Thank you. Gideon?
Yes, our prayer is always that we can build trusting relationships and not simply transactional relationships, but transformational relationships with policymakers, with agency officials, but also with other institutions. We can better understand their needs and how we can talk about and advance institutional religious freedoms without favoring one religion or over another, or without favoring religious groups over non-religious groups. Those are always our prayers.
Yeah, that's great. And I did ask Charlie, and so on behalf of Faith-Based Leaders Alliance, he shared that you can pray for wisdom and discernment for pastors and faith-based organizational leaders that are seeking to equip and shepherd their people to be faithful, to be kind, and just citizens in complex and complicated situations. So keep in mind our clergy and our faith-based leaders. Stephanie, I will let you also answer, but then you're also going to take the reins from me and wrap up our time together.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I would add that, one of the things that I have been praying through and would invite your prayers for in kind of this kind of challenging season in many ways in American public life is just that the heart posture of God's people would stay soft. Um, I was at a conference over the past weekend, and one of our colleagues, Matthew Kamink, who serves as a CPJ fellow, we were talking to college students on a panel, and he shared with students, we were talking about, how to disagree well. And he shared with students, the thought of how in Scripture Jesus, when his hour has come, is in the garden, right? He's praying, and uh, they come to take him away. And Jesus's impulse in that moment is actually to reach out and heal. And I think that that's something that I would invite us to pray for Christians, that our posture would be one of healing in the face of things that we know are not a joke and very sobering, um, have a lot of complexity and challenge, but that our heart posture is soft, both towards God and towards other people, rather than one of despair or hate. And I think that's a place where, yes, I pray that for us. I hope you will join us in praying that for us. Okay, before we conclude, I really do want to pause and just simply say thank you to everyone who joined us. Your engagement with CPJ, whether it is through your prayers, your conversations, you sharing our work with other people, your financial generosity, all of this allows this mission to continue equipping citizens, developing leaders, and strengthening public life in ways that often unfold quietly but powerfully. Public justice isn't upheld in a single moment. It's not upheld by a single institution. Public justice is built through communities of people who commit themselves to faithful work over time. And we are deeply grateful that you are part of that community, even if it is your first time here. One thing that I heard while we were talking is that CPJ is sort of at our most powerful when people help others discover us. So if there was someone who came to mind during this conversation, we hope you will share CPJ with them. You'll get access to the conversation after the event. We'll send you an email. So you could even hit forward on it to your friend, invite them to watch it, and then follow up by asking them what they thought about it. So thank you for giving your time this evening and for walking alongside CPJ in this work. It's truly a privilege to serve together, and we're grateful. Good night.